Welcome to Friday. I know I like to say that every Fridays. I need to think of a new saying, but I really do. Even when I was working, day to day in an office, which many of you still do, I would always appreciate Fridays. And even in the legal industry, we appreciate Fridays, except for those 4 or 5 o'clock things that land on your lap at the last minute because an attorney knew about it but didn't tell you till the last minute. So I want to welcome you to the show. We do have some people already here. But first I want to tell you the question of the day so you can start answering it while I talk for a little bit. So today's question, because of our guest today, Kathleen, does something similar to what I do. I help people get into litigation support. She helps people get into a business analyst role. And she does a lot of the similar teachings. So we're going to talk about that today. But what advice do you tend to give a newbie in your field? So, whatever role you're in, what is one of the top things that you like to tell newbies when they come on board in terms of your years of experience and what you would share with them? And while you're answering that question of the day, in the comments, I want to hopefully not get emotional, but I wanted to thank everybody who commented on my Facebook post last week on my Litigation Support Guru page, because I was supposed to have a show last week and I just couldn't do it. I had too much emotional stuff going on with not enough sleep, working too many hours on my part-time job, and a death in the family, a close member of my family, my father-in-law. And the funeral was coming up on Saturday, and the show was the day before, and I just couldn't. I was too distracted. So I wouldn't have been good company, you know how they say that? But everybody commented really nice comments, and I really appreciated them, so I wanted to thank you for that. Okay, so we've got Paula in the house. And thank you, Paula, for always telling me that you, instead of your YouTube name. Susan is saying happy Friday. Bob is here once again. Bob's getting such good content, he's making time to come back now. Let's see. Meryl's in the house. Hey, Meryl. And Meryl's following up. On Friday morning, there's always hope for an impromptu happy hour. It's funny because some people are saying good morning and because they're on the West Coast and it's totally lunchtime and I'm hungry here. Okay, so Patty here next to me in Maryland is saying hi. And Kathleen, Patty currently has a title of business analyst. She was formerly a paralegal. Okay, so here we go. Paula is saying, I tell newbies not to be afraid of breaking things in terms of software and processes. The best way to learn. We say that in litigation support too, so great. That's a good one. Susan, sounded like a hard week. You got to take care of you. That's what most people said. That's why it was touching. Nicole. Hey, Nicole, good to see you here. And Ramesh is saying happy birthday. Happy Friday. Where did the birthday come from? Oh, I know. Tomorrow is my brother's birthday, and I'm trying not to forget that. He's 4 years younger than me, and he's in Oklahoma, and I got to make sure I remember to tell him. Patty. I'm a newbie, I got nothing. Patty, when you had a newbie paralegal come on board, what was one of the things that you like to tell them in terms of working with the attorneys probably? I'm sure you have something, Patty, but I know you're new at what you're doing right now. Okay, so let's see. I wanted to show you the dog cam real quick. This is Maggie. Harley is roaming around. Okay, let's get started with the show. Welcome to the Legal Tech Mastery Show. My name is Amy Bowser-Rollins, and on this show we talk about everything legal technology and also getting into a career in the legal industry. So a little bit of overlap of career coaching, mentoring, and definitely a lot of legal technology. So today is more along the lines of career coaching and mentoring with sorry, I'm distracted. I love the comments. All right, I'm going to bring Kathleen on the screen so you can enjoy Kathleen with me. Hey, Kathleen.
Enjoy me. Okay, I'll try to live up to that standard.
Oh, they're going to have a blast. Watching you and I go back and forth, we have a blast together, so they're about to have a blast.
That's true. If nothing else, we're entertaining.
Let's see. Luis is saying hi. Good to see you, Luis. I'm
Hello.
trying... I missed you on Wednesday. Okay, here's Susan answering the question of the day. It's okay to be new. We're all new at one point. We all start at that same place. From there, all you can do is take it one step at a time. That's good advice, especially for somebody who's freaking out a little. Bob, who teaches paralegals. We tell our paralegal newbies to look out for ethical issues and don't be afraid to say no if the firm is straying from that. Oh, good job. Good job. Okay, and then Susan's saying, hello, Kathleen.
Hi, Susan. and welcome, Patty, to the dark side. I hope you're enjoying life as a BA.
Yeah, Patty says, you know stuff they don't know. Not sure exactly what she means by that, but I'm sure she'll clarify. Because I was trying to get her to answer the question of the day. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Kathleen, can you just start with telling us your career path so far, so people get a sense of what your knowledge is coming from?
Sure. Like most people, I would imagine, I started off in a completely different place than where I landed. I actually started off in school for nursing, but didn't stay there long because I got way too distracted by technology, basically. So I actually started off life doing some coding, but very quickly ended up becoming a tech writer because there was nobody else on staff to write the messages and the user guides and all of that. And from that, I got very frustrated because I was having to write like documents like this because nobody thought about the user when they were building the system and coding it, when really, it should have been like this. Which has got me involved into the, user interface, user experience thing. But by doing that, I ended up getting pulled into the business analyst side of things because before you can work on the UI and the UX, you have to have the requirements. So that was the very roundabout way that I end up doing what I do. And so basically the job that I do today is sort of a mix of BA and the UI UX. So I start off working on the requirements and maintaining that through the process. But then when they start to get to the point of being real, I switch over and do the UI UX also.
Okay.
That, believe it or not, is a short version.
Yeah, that was good. That was good. Okay, here we go, Patty. Let's give Patty her time. Paralegals know different stuff. Sometimes we know the procedural stuff, and they know the technical stuff. Gotcha. Thanks for clarifying. Okay, UI, UX, you said it real fast what the words were, but can we just clarify in case it comes up again?
Sorry, see, buzzwords, right? They always bite us. So UI UX is user interface and user experience. So it's the combination of making sure that you're building systems that work for the way people think and how they approach their tasks. And then you build the user interface, the actual pieces that they interact with to reflect that and to provide the information they need at the time they need it. Basically, the whole point of that is to make sure that the system is helping the person and that the person is not doing things that the system should be doing for them.
Right. So you guys, you know that I work part-time at CasePoint. CasePoint is a software provider, amongst other things, and I work directly with development team, and I help them, with all my vast years of experience using tools like theirs, just help them, with giving advice on, tweaks here and there. So it's actually a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so I also need you to define, Kathleen, what a business analyst is, because when I first met you and you said I'm starting a show on, business analyst, I had to Google it. And since then, since I'm aware of the term, that's phrase now, the title, I've seen actually in my role in legal, I've seen some in-house legal department people emailing and their title has business analyst. And then yesterday or Wednesday, I had a conversation with somebody who called a business analyst someone who would, because they were looking to hire one, someone who would take data from like time entry and um, uh, just data points out of a database and analyze it and then build reports for the clients. So that was different. So can you sort of, in your words, define what a business analyst is or what business analysis is?
Yeah, well,
Across verticals.
what you described is exactly one of the challenges we face, because everybody thinks we do something different, and that very often is the case depending on where it is that you're working. So there was a period not too long ago where I was just calling myself a utility infielder because it was just easier, as long as people knew something about baseball. Because a utility infielder, for those of you who are not baseball fans, is a player who can play pretty much any position, but particularly usually somewhere in the infield, because that's what we end up doing. So yeah,
Can you guys tell why I love Kathleen?
because I go off on tangents. Yeah, it keeps my brain happy with all these things popping around inside of it. So the basic universal-ish definition of a business analyst is somebody who is tasked with understanding business change and the needs that come from that. In assessing, the impact of those kind of changes, and then generally capturing those requirements, analyzing the data around it, which is where that one comes from, documenting requirements. But really, the business analyst is someone who is involved in projects, usually from start to finish. So they get involved early on as the project is, being thought about, and it may just die there, all the way through to, quality assurance and testing and that kind of things, dealing with issues after release, and then cycling back when they start to do the upgrades and that kind of thing. So that's the short version. The reason that there's confusion around it is because we do so many different things that the people that you talk to throughout your career only see you at the point in time when they're involved in the project, so they think that's all you do.
Okay.
So basically, yeah, it does break down into sometimes, it's more technical, sometimes it's more data analysis or modeling, sometimes it's process design, sometimes it's systems analysis. And some of us do all of those,
Okay.
Hence the confusion.
And in your show, many episodes of your show, you clarify the fine line between a BA and a PM.
Yes, that is very often a source of contention in our world, because a lot of times the PM is the project manager, and generally their job is to herd the cats, which is all of us, to make sure that the project is staying on target as much as possible, given the fact that dates and timelines are generally fantasy when they're first created and become more real over time. But a lot of times they kind of try to do our job. And to be honest, sometimes we try to do theirs. So there's fault on both sides. But, as long as we stay focused on the requirements and making things work for the people who are going to use them, getting the information for, if it's a software thing, for the development team that's going to use it, or if it's a process thing for the people who are, going to be working on the process, it works out okay. But there very often is some friction between us and the product managers, because their main focus is the deadlines, and we're more focused on getting things right.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not that either one of us is wrong. We're both doing our jobs.
Right.
It's just that sometimes one trying to achieve their focused goal can cause a little friction. But by talking it out and sitting down and getting everybody in the room, getting everybody to agree which is going to take priority for this particular issue, you can move on in a pleasant manner rather than the sniping and fighting that can go on sometimes.
Yeah.
Not that that's ever happened to me.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a project manager tends to have a strong personality, so if you come into their, environment and you don't handle it right, you and your co-host Mary Ann talk a lot about how to handle it right. In fact, near the end of today's show, we're going to talk about something along those lines of, persuasion. Mm-hmm. So, because I think it is a delicate thing, and it almost comes with maturity, I think. The more experience, confidence you get, the better you get at it.
Yeah, I think that's, some people see maturity only as age. It is a matter of experience and confidence. If you've got those two at whatever age, you'll be fine.
Yeah. Okay. So you guys, Kathleen's had a show. She started, I think, a little bit before me, a little bit after me, right around the same time I started
Yeah.
my show in the fall. And I watch her show. She watches my show. And the
Yes, I'm
content.
working very often on Fridays.
We were amazed at the overlap. So I basically went through a bunch of her episodes and pulled out some nuggets of, goodness, good wisdom from Kathleen's perspective, which would align well with the content in this show and, you guys as the viewers. So let's see. Susan is agreeing with us, I think. Maturity, confidence, and ego management. Good
Yes.
terminology, Susan.
That nails it.
Okay, so along those lines, a lot of what we're going to talk about today is from specific, if I can only talk, episodes of Kathleen's show. And the first one is she talked about the top 10 skills that a BA needs. And, I don't know if you guys remember, I used to have the top 10 traits that a lit support professional needs. So anyway, she broke down the skills into 3 categories, which I thought was interesting, 2 of which I knew. One was like, what does she mean by that? And that's the one I'm going to have her talk to you today about. So she broke them down into core skills, soft skills, which we all pretty much know, are people skills and things like that. And then hard skills, like tangible things that you learn and measure, as she puts it, like learning software and things like that. So Kathleen, can you talk about the 3 types of core skills that you mentioned in that episode?
Yeah, so the core skills, just in case this is new terminology, are, the basic functional kind of skills that, anybody is going to need to do their job. And do this job in particular. But to be honest, it really covers pretty much every job. I actually had this conversation with my nephews when they were starting to look, because it does apply. If you're going to work in the business world, these apply.
Yeah.
So basically, it starts with strong communication skills. I mean, that is just absolutely something you need. The good thing is that if you don't have it, automatically, it is something that can be learned, which is awesome. That's not always the case for everything. So you need to be able to communicate across all types of communication. You need to make sure that you're making your point as clearly as possible, unambiguous, and you need to make sure that it works across different groups. So that means making sure that, if you're talking to the developers, that you are maybe using slightly more technical terms than you would use with maybe your business subject matter expert, that type of thing. You need to have a high tolerance for ambiguity and the ability to create structure, particularly out of chaos, because that's usually where we're brought in. Mm-hmm. So, in the beginning, the initial scope of any project, the requirements are usually horribly ill-defined. And you only were really going to get clarity out of digging deeper, asking lots of questions, and being able to organize those results in a way that everybody will be able to understand. To be honest, that's like, half of the beginning of any project is going through and really digging, because at most you've got a high level fuzzy, idea that people are kicking around, and a lot of them will feel that is the requirement, and it's only through digging through that you can really get down and find out all those little nuances and all those little trip points that might have been missed otherwise. And the third one is you need to be a good listener. You need to be able to listen and absorb information from, again, all types of different people. You need to be able to have the confidence to ask questions. It's okay to not know something. That's why, there are subject matter experts. You're not expected to know everything. Yeah. But being able to listen and, to know how to ask questions and to listen deeply, because sometimes what they're saying on the surface may not sound so important, but if you really think about it and listen to it in context with the other things they're saying, you may uncover other nuggets that are really critical to the project.
So those 3 things you just mentioned all apply to us working in the legal field, and specifically with attorneys. Even getting a request from an attorney, you need to listen. You're going to get fuzzy request. You need to take a deeper dive. So that's why I wanted you to talk about it, because it totally applies to our industry. Okay, so go ahead.
Pretty generic.
But you articulated it well in your episode, which is why I wanted you to repeat it here. Okay, so one of my favorite topics, you also believe in it, which is awesome. And that's shadowing. I always encourage people, especially when they're emailing me and say, how can I get into this field? One of the things I suggest is shadowing. So why don't you talk about, well, first, why don't you define what shadowing is?
Okay. So shadowing is the act of following users as they perform their tasks or interact with a product, an application, a process, customers, whatever it is that they do. So basically what you're doing is you're trying to very carefully, without affecting the activity that's going on, observe real life situations, see how people are really doing the tasks that they're doing, the jobs that they're doing, how they're interacting with the tools they use, because that's how you're best going to see the difference between what they say their problems are, what they tell you is going on, and what's actually going on. Not that they're trying to lie to you in any way. It's just that people get so close to the work that they're doing that sometimes they don't really think that little things that they do every day or they've learned to work around are important. Whereas by you watching them and seeing what's going on, you'll start to pick up on those kinds of things and be able to balance them out with the things that they've told you and create a better solution for them.
Right. And one of the things that you can also learn is how, in terms of the communication skills we were just talking about, like I would have a newbie shadow me in a bunch of meetings with attorneys talking about their specific projects, because you could see what questions do I ask, what question do I ask after they say that, how do I handle things specific to that person or that project. It just gives you, the more you shadow somebody or people, the more you get, like you said, you learn it as it's happening, as opposed to them sitting there in front of you and going, well, you could do this and you could do that. Like, it's not the same as true shadowing.
Yeah, I think it gives people a better context for the instruction you're giving them before and after. Because it's one thing to hear it and think you understand it, but to see it in action is very often a very different animal. So yeah, I do find that the combination tends to work and kind of drives the points home fast for them.
So when you were talking about shadowing in that episode, you broke it down, and I wanted you to talk about 3 areas that you talked about. The first one was what you called observation. So what advice did you give for that?
So yeah, observation, it's sort of what Mara and I tend to refer to it between ourselves as being, Jane Goodall out in the wild, right, with the gorillas.
Oh, that's a good, I should steal that.
Feel free. She didn't storm in and start telling the gorillas what to do, right? She
Right.
hung around the edges. She got them used to you being there to the point where they stopped paying attention to her, because that's half of the challenge. You need to make sure that the people that you're shadowing are at ease. And by the very nature of you being there, they're going to be acting differently. That's just how humans are. So you want to, develop some sort of rapport with them. You want, them to not see you as somebody who's going to get them in trouble or somebody who's looking for their mistakes. And you want to become as much of the woodwork as you possibly can. And as you're doing that, you're also building trust, because what you need them to do is to talk out loud as they're doing their job, which does not feel normal to anybody. Even those of us who are gotten used to talking on video, it still feels weird as you're doing something that you do every day to have to articulate it as you're going along. It's just awkward.
Yep.
So you need to have them feel comfortable and safe and trust that, you're doing this and it's not going to come back on them in any negative way. And as you're doing it, you're going to have to keep reminding them, because again, it's not natural. So they're going to automatically stop as they're fixed with a problem or they get interrupted. You're going to have to just gently remind them, please, I need you as much as you can to talk about what you're thinking and why you're doing what you're doing. You want to just sit, watch, listen as they're performing their tasks. You want to make sure that you are taking a ton of notes, but try to do it, in a way that isn't distracting. I usually try to put something in my lap so it's not out of their line of vision. I usually try to sit back a little bit from where they're working, so I'm kind of out of their eye line.
Yeah.
But you want to try to make notes of everything you possibly can. Not that it all will be useful, but you don't know what's going to be useful until you're done. So just as the thoughts are coming in your head, just automatically make the notes. Some people like to record either just audio or the using video, which is fine as long as somebody's comfortable with it. But if you get any sense that it's throwing them off their game, you're going to have to go back to just taking notes on paper or whatever. I don't recommend on a computer unless you have a really soft, quiet keyboard, because it's distracting.
Yep.
So let's see. So you want to be aware of the fact that, like I said, that anybody that's being watched is going to be doing things a little bit differently, but the longer you sit there, the more likely they're going to not not notice you as much. You want to pay attention to, as they're talking out loud, the differences and the similarities between what they say and what they're actually doing. Because again, not that they're trying to, mess you up or anything, but, what they're saying and what they're actually doing may not be exactly 100% in sync. And you want to, when you're doing this kind of work, you want to vary the time of day that you're doing it, the person that you're doing it, like if there's a group of people to choose from, because that way you'll get to see, the differences between individuals. You'll be able to see the similarities between those individuals. You'll be able to see how things change when it's a peak situation, a normal situation, when it's slow, when there's a crisis. So this is not something you're going to do once. You're probably going to want to do it a couple of times over, a period of time so that you get the best, overall picture of what's going on.
Yeah, when I saw your reference to different times of the day, we actually do that with when we're QCing work from review, what we call document review attorneys, people that have reviewed documents for hours and hours and hours at a time, check their morning, their midday, and their evening work, because when they do it for 10 hours a day, they get tired.
Sure.
Now, one thing you said in taking notes is not just to write out text. And when I saw what you said, I was like, oh my God, that's me. So go ahead and say what you told.
Yeah, well, there's, text writing downward is the obvious thing. But a lot of times I find, and I don't know, maybe this has got something to do with the fact that I do UI work too, but sometimes I find it works better if I just, draw a quick note. If you've ever heard something called sketchnoting, where the idea is that you're writing down concepts, but you're also just, drawing like little pictures that represent whatever concepts, hit your head at that moment. Now, this is something that, people are like, oh, well, I can't draw. It's not going to hang on a wall in a museum. This is about squiggles and lines and circles that make sense to you. It's kind of thing, again, that can be learned. You learn over time. But I find that I can communicate to myself the situation or the layout or something that I noticed maybe in the process, like I thought it was going to do this and it said it went this. Quickly and easily, instead of having to write a paragraph down in order for me to remember it later. So it's about trying different things and, finding a way that's going to make sense to you, later after you're done. Just one other tip as you're doing that, though, don't wait too long to go back and review your notes and turn them into something cohesive, because your brain will forget over time. But absolutely. Yeah, I do find that it's much faster in some situations to just scribble out a quick drawing, image, process, whatever, a little flow, or just even, like sometimes, particularly because I do a lot of software work, sometimes you go and you see like Post-it notes all over the place. And so sometimes I'll just draw a big square with little squares all around it to remind me that these people have notes everywhere and that we need to look into why.
Yeah, exactly. So I was going to say two things I do is, one drawing I might do is of the screen. So I really quick go, there was three options on the screen and they chose this one, or this is the problematic one, or just to remind myself what was on the screen. I just, draw some boxes and circles and stuff, just so I remember visually what the layout was. And the other thing is, like you almost alluded to, is sometimes I just draw something that is my brain's translation of what they said. Yep. So if it's almost like a if this then that thing, where I'm drawing it instead of writing it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, that's very common for me because, by the time I'm shadowing somebody, we have sort of what we think is a picture in our head of what's going on. And so sometimes even before I go into it, I'll just, across the top of the page, just quickly boxes, flow what we think the process is, because that way, as I'm sitting with these people, when it's varying, I can just stick a line in and say, okay, this happened and then this happened, and that wasn't a part of our original. So that kind of thing. The other thing I find helpful, particularly with the UI kind of stuff, is sometimes I'll do like you do, like draw the screen with the boxes or the form or whatever, and then I'll put a little frowny face next to the one that I catch everybody sighing at because they're like, shoot, that's not the right one, because they're always going to the wrong place. It's like, okay, see, these are the things that they're so used to it, and it's so subconscious that they probably wouldn't think to mention it in the survey or the interviews we do or anything. But if you're doing something and you see, everybody gets to a certain point in the process and goes, shoot, to have to go back and do it again. Yeah. That's a frustration point. That's a time waste. It's a possible point of errors. So that's something that needs to be attention needs to be paid to, even though maybe it's not a part of the project right now.
But like you said, when you go and look at that later, you're pretty sure you understand what that frowny face looks like.
Yes. They were unhappy here.
So when I take newbies into a room where I'm going to meet with a partner, which is, a high-level attorney in a law firm, it's intimidating, and the attorney sometimes doesn't expect me to bring friends to the meeting, you know. So I tell them before we go in, like literally, like you said earlier, stay over there, so out of the line of sight to the extent that you can sit at the end of the conference table or something like that. But also, I tell them, do not open your mouth. Like, if you can do this well, this is what I tell people when I'm coaching them. If you can shadow like we're telling you to, they will let you do it over and over again because they'll learn to trust that you're going to stay in your lane, so to speak.
Yeah.
So one thing you had in there was, and it might have been in your last, the end where you said tips for success. But you had in there something about don't interrupt them, don't like quiz them, ask them questions about what they're doing, because that's the opposite of shadowing.
Right. And it's hard because, again, we're people too. You know, what we're really doing here is we're observing human behavior. That's why psychology is so important to, you know, what we do. But, you know, we're humans too. And so even for ourselves, we need to remind ourselves when we go to do this, even if we've been doing it for a long time. But certainly the first time you bring somebody into a situation, you have the chat beforehand and then the chat just before you walk in the room.
Yeah.
And that's exactly it. You know, it's watch, listen, take notes, don't interrupt.
Yeah.
That's not what we're there for. If you have questions, you know, make a note of it so you won't forget it and you won't be overly focused on it. So you'll be focused on the conversation. And if the opportunity presents itself, you can ask later, or if not, then ask me later, and then we'll figure out if we need to go get that information.
They should jot down notes for questions later. Exactly. That's
and that actually helps me too, because I know, you know, if I work with them long enough that I trust that they're taking good notes, that kind of lessens my load, which means I can focus even more on the conversation.
Yeah.
So, you know, some people are like, oh, you know, I don't want to have to deal with this newbie and all that. But, you know, first of all, we've all been newbies, so you need to pay it forward. But also, it really, if you are training somebody well, it actually becomes an asset to you, and you're going to miss them when they're gone doing their own project because they've actually helped you with getting your stuff done. The other thing I always say to them is don't suggest solutions when you're in the room. Whoever you're talking to at whatever level, that's not our job. We don't make promises. We don't suggest solutions. We are collecting information. And if they look to us for solutions, say, this is great information, we are going to bring it back and come back with a good solution.
Yeah.
If users suggest a solution, or if a customer or whoever you're talking to, you know, if they're aware of the project you're working on, they're like, I really needed to do this. Smile, nod, take the notes, because maybe that is where it's going to go. The flip side of it is everybody you talk to wants every solution to be built just for them. So you need to keep that in mind too. Again, that's why you don't make promises. You need to make sure that you remain unbiased as you go through this process. Don't try to put your goals and what you want in the project into the conversation. You are getting the information from them.
Yeah.
And make sure that you don't interpret their behavior without confirming what's going on. So just because somebody makes an eye roll or sighs, don't think it's about your question or about what they're looking at. You know, at some point you're going to need to find out why that happened, because it could just be that they remembered, oh, I forgot to give my kid his lunch.
Exactly.
So you don't want that to affect your project.
Yeah. Okay, so let's it's 24 after, so we have a lot to cover.
Boy, I can chat, can't I?
No, it's not. No, you're fine. But I want to make sure I might skip some things here and there. So,
Okay.
But you did an episode that was so on point to what I do, and that is help people who are trying to get into a field, yours and mine.
Yeah.
And you, the name of your episode was Beating the Experience Needed Vicious Cycle. Because, you know, the job description says experience needed. And you gave such good advice for how to get around that, you know, and to get the confidence to apply anyway. And I want to pull some of those nuggets out. So one thing you talked about was that it's not about your cover letter or your resume, no matter what any recruiter will tell you. It's more about the interview itself. Okay, so what we're going to talk about is more about like preparing yourself for the interview, how to succeed in the interview and get the job, even if they think they want, you know, a certain person. So, okay, so talk about your advice that you gave for, and we're going to break this down, you guys. So Kathleen, you gave advice for how do you take experience you had in a different role and work that into an interview, you know, where they think that you might not be the right person.
Right. Yeah. I mean, too many people read the job thing and it's like, oh, they want all this experience, I can't even bother. You have more experience than you think. So, you know, just as an example, you know, if a job posting says, you know, that you need to have, you know, all kinds of experience in, like, you know, running a project or, organizing it or whatever, you just look in your own life for things that would cross over. So, if you've been working as a secretary, for example, and you're thinking that, you've been around, the BAs or the legal support team, and you realize that there's a lot of stuff that is interesting and there's some crossover. Just look for things that you're doing today that's sort of parallel, even if it's not an exact. And you can work those into your resume as an example of, okay, well, sure, I haven't done that job title yet, but here are the things that I do right now that are absolutely a part of what this is that I'm looking to get into.
Right.
And as long as you, present it that way with enough confidence during particularly the interview, people will forget that you're not already doing the job because you're talking about the actual work that needs to be done. And that's what they're looking to hire.
Yeah.
The job posting is always a wish list. So, and that's okay because that's what they do. But
yeah.
So all you have to do is take what you've got and go, okay, well, if I just turn this a little bit in this light, there you go. It fits perfect.
Right. You mentioned, and I give the same advice, the more you learn enough about what they're looking for, you can just talk about how you contributed to something. Like I did the same thing you just said. I have them change their resume to talk about how was the company better after having hired you? What did you bring to the table? What did you, create, design, solve? Put that on your resume. And then also, what like you said,
did you bring in? You saw a process that took 18 steps and you made it 2. Mm-hmm. Make sure you get that across. That's critical.
Highlight it, yeah. Okay, so you already mentioned the job descriptions are wish lists. I thought that was funny when you said that because people don't realize that sometimes. They're so literal, and even the recruiters are literal, especially the ones that don't understand the job they're trying to fill.
Oh, yes.
We're not going to go there because we could vent up there.
That's a whole other show.
But Susan, if you're still around, one of the quotes that you had in the comments from Kathleen's show was, "It isn't about the jobs you've held, it's about the skills you have."
Yep.
Right? So stop thinking about it as, I haven't done that job before, because like you said, the job description is a wish list. And you also said in that episode that job titles are just labels, which I totally agree with. Like, I don't even care what my title is anymore because it doesn't really mean anything. So, okay, so then let's transition. You started talking about in that episode, and I was like, where's she going with this? Because you said it's not magic. I'm like, magic? And you said it's not easy, and then you said it requires some work, and then you gave the perfect advice related to what you called, I'm labeling it myself, the portfolio concept. So can you talk about what you meant with that?
Yeah, so, when people hear the word portfolio, they tend to think immediately of like graphic designers and artists, which is absolutely accurate. But there's no reason why the rest of us can't have our own little type of portfolio that we bring, to job interviews, even if it's just in your head. So the idea here is that you want concrete examples that you can talk about that you can then tie into whatever the pain point is of the person who is interviewing you, because that's really what the interview is about. They're looking for somebody to solve a problem for them.
Yeah.
They've got something that's an issue and they want it to go away. So you want to look at your history, even if it's not in a direct, lineup for what they're hiring, and look for those concrete examples that you can talk about. And then you definitely want to take the pieces apart a little bit so they understand how it all fits together and how it relates to the problem that they're looking to hire somebody to solve, because by doing that, you're telling them, I'm the person who can solve that for you.
Right. By telling the story, even if it's not the exact story they're looking for, by telling a story that, like you said earlier, how you contributed, how you identified a problem, and how you solved the problem. Just those 3 things. Just by talking it through, that's what sells the hiring manager on you. Really, unless you put your foot in your mouth and start lying and tripping over your words, which you're not going to do, because you're only going to give concrete examples, like you said, and I love the way you say that, concrete examples of things you've actually done, because then you could just talk all day about things you've actually done. Okay, so then you switch to the job description may want you to have certain tools that you don't have, and your advice for this, I give a similar advice, but you took it one step further, and I loved how you said it. So you talked about downloading the trial version. We all say that, right? Even people that don't coach well say that. But they don't say the next part. I give them some advice, and you said Go ahead and tell them what you said if you can remember.
Oh,
Otherwise,
the
I'll
passive
prompt
thing.
you.
Yeah. So that's okay. So yeah, the next step of it is not enough to download it. It's not enough to go and take a course. You have to actively participate and do whatever it is that you're trying to prove that you can do. So do the tutorials, do the hands-on steps, design a project, using the tool that they've got, even if it's got nothing to do with anything you're doing in your job today. You want to make sure that you're not just sitting back and saying, okay, I sat here, I watched that video, I took this class, okay, now I know everything about it, because watching and reading is not the same as doing. So if you are taking the course and then doing what they just talked about, or doing what they did in the video, stopping it, go try it, go back, compare it to what they did, you're going to not only have a much better understanding of the tool, but then you'll also have those concrete examples that you can take to the interview and show that you can do these things, even if it's not part of your thing today. The other part of that is if you're taking like a course, with a person, like in a room, like you're going someplace and there's a teacher and there's people in the classroom, that's another place where people tend to kind of want to sit back and be passive. But don't, get involved, talk to the teacher. If it's software that maybe you can't afford and it's not something that you can free download, say, during the break, is it okay if I keep working, or can I come in earlier? Can I come in late to work on it? Because maybe there's not time during the class, but that way too, you can amp up and get more experience than you would have if you just sat there and read the book and took the notes.
Exactly. I mean, I always love to tell the story about one of my students who I sponsored. They gave him an internship at the end of the paralegal program, and he spent 10 days with me, and he did my job. I've told the story so many times, but because he had the mouse in his hand, because he was actually taking the steps in the software they didn't really know much about, when he went to do his first round of phone interviews, who he was interviewing with friends of mine, it reached out to me afterwards, he knows so much. How does he know so much? And it was exactly what you're saying. So you guys, she said in the show, she said, no passive absorbing, which I love that. So don't just watch a YouTube tutorial or on Udemy or lynda.com or whatever. That's not learning the tool. Figure out, make up, or in our world, it might be database software. Just figure out how to make a database to organize your recipes, your records, your whatever, right? So use the software so that you can, and I wouldn't go into the interview and say, I created a database on how to organize my recipes, because people are going to roll their eyes. But you can say, I use the software to create records, and I created a filter or a search, use terminology in the software. Wouldn't you agree, Kathleen?
Absolutely, and it'll become easier to do that. It'll become automatic to do that once you've actually used the tool to accomplish a goal, right? I mean, you don't tell them, you organized your, CD rack that way, but by saying that, you built this with this many records, and, it has this functionality, and maybe you even did a couple of table joins or whatever, those are the triggers that in their head are going, okay, they know this, okay, they know
exactly.
this. But it'll be so automatic for you, it won't feel like you're just reciting from a book or a video you watched, because you're talking actively and animatedly about something that you built. And that's it changes the conversation.
Yep, that's what happened with Darren. He just talked about what he did. All right, so Susan's chiming in. We are a pile of skills. Are we, Susan? Are we a pile of skills that we just happen to be using in this formation? Listen to her. At this time. Wow. They can be reformatted. Listen to her. Her marketing skills are coming in. And speaking of marketing, let's see what she says here. Everything you're saying also applies to business owners and people in sales when you talk about the value you bring to the table. And actually, I use those words, Susan, when I'm telling them what value are you adding, both in your previous jobs on your resume and what you're in the interview for. What value are you what's going to trigger them to say yes? You need to provide quantitative and qualitative support to back that up. Let's see here. Hi, Unkit. Unkit saying hi. Watch and you will see, listen and you will hear, do and you will learn. Yeah, we all know that. Yeah.
That's the mantra.
So, okay. Now, we're not going to do a whole show about this, but we are going to briefly go on a rant. Okay, and I'm going to let Kathleen start, and maybe I don't even have to say anything because she and I agree. A lot of recruiters will tell people that I'm talking to, or, they'll come to me after they talk to a recruiter. We'll tell them, as a newbie, to go get certifications. What do you think about that, Kathleen? Yeah, stay calm.
Oh, it makes me crazy, and it happens all the time. So yes, I will minimize my rant. No. Okay, all the certification proves is that you paid money to somebody who handed you a piece of paper. Does not prove anything else. And if you are new and you always do all these certifications, it just proves that you've got more money than sense, probably. Because if you're not doing things that are actively doing the job, then the certification is meaningless. If you want to get certification later after you've got some experience to, bolster and further, up your status, that's fine. But anybody who tells you that you have to have all these, certifications in order to get it is usually selling certifications. So no, don't do that to yourself. It's way more important that you have these concrete examples, that you have targeted your resume in a way that addresses the pain points of the people who are looking to hire, and certifications you can worry about later if you want to. It's hard to keep short.
So my thing is, when you're new, let me see if I can articulate this pretty well. When you're new, certifications are not helpful at all because, like you said, you go and learn and you get that piece of paper, but you only learned the steps. You didn't learn the life around it, the decision-making around it. And also, why get certified in a particular type of software that you don't even know if the law firm you go to is going to have?
Thank you. Yes.
And I believe, and I think you have said this before too, certifications to me are good for somebody who has the experience already to go get certified to prove or to sort of, check that box that I have learned it and now I want those letters behind my name. So do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, certifications without experience is pointless, but if you have the experience and you get the certification, that's totally great. That totally works.
All right, so Bob's laughing with us. I love that you guys are typing how you're animated, so Meryl's laughing out loud, so we're cracking them up. Okay, we're moving on. I'm going to skip due to time.
Okay.
Because I want to make sure we get to this last part.
So that's the problem. Amy and I could talk for days. We have a lot to go over, and there is a lot of overlap.
So you did this show that you called The Power of Persuasion. And of course, this goes across all industries, but I really loved the way that the advice you gave. And in our world, can I just say we're dealing with attorneys? We're dealing with strong personalities that are very opinionated most of the time, except for the nicer ones. So you need to gather enough gumption, right? It's a finesse thing, it's a nuance thing, it's a confidence thing. So we're going to go over some awesome points that Kathleen did in her show about the power of persuasion. So you went over 6 principles of persuasion. I don't care about the other 5 because I really liked the one on authority. So can you talk about the authority principle? Yeah,
so the more somebody sees you as an authority, the more likely they are to listen and at least consider what you're saying. Without that, a lot of people will just dismiss everything out of hand if they think that they're smarter or in a better authority position than you are. So that is something that, it is absolutely critical and, frankly, useful in life. But it's something that needs to be, it's like trust. You need to build it. So you need to make sure that, every interaction you're having with these people, reinforces the fact that when you talk, you're talking because you know what you're talking about. And that, you are able to listen to other people, and work with them. But if you are very sure about something and you have the facts to back you up, that, you don't back down, that you just present yourself in a calm, professional manner as, okay, I'm saying this, for a reason, and I'm not saying this for my own entertainment. And that is something that they can trust, that they can turn around, and say to their boss or the people on their team who maybe are not part of the meeting and know that they're not going to get shot down or laughed at because it's information that they can count on.
Right.
And if you have that basis to work off of, you will find all of your conversations, even when people are disagreeing, will go smoother. Not that you're going to win every time.
Right.
Although that would be nice.
Right.
But at least, you will be heard, listened, and you won't be dismissed out of hand, because that can really undermine any project anybody's on. If you've got important information and they don't listen to you, that can really cause problems.
I'm going to insert a tangent that I wasn't expecting to say, because the way you said that reminded me of why we started Women in E-Discovery, which is a women's organization in our industry with legal tech. and the way you just said it was, I can't repeat what you said. It was too good. But men, this is what we've talked about in the past in Women in E-Discovery meetings. Men tend to do what you just said with authority, and they're totally lying.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they don't have the experience. They don't, know what they're talking about, and they can't follow through with what they just said. But they have no problem lying, right? So that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about doing it the right way, persuasiveness the right way, and also don't lie. That's not what we're talking about.
Right. I mean, there's a big difference between somebody who knows their stuff and is bringing useful information to the conversation. And, no offense to anybody who's in the business, but, the typical used car salesman, stereotype. Yes, people can fake persuasion. They can fake authority. And there's a huge gap between that and actual authority and persuasion. And a lot of this, I think, from Erin and I did come from the things that we've run into as women, where, we could say something, particularly this happens a lot it used to happen in IT. It doesn't happen for me anymore because they've learned. But, you would say something, and you would be blown off, and then 5 minutes later, a guy would say it and they'd be like, oh, really? Well, that's interesting, and it took all of my self-control to not reach across the table because, excuse me. Now, usually what had happened there was, I had said it, and then, one of the guys that I've been working with on the team knew I was right, saw what was happening, and said it just to get the point across. But that shouldn't happen. It makes me crazy.
Yeah.
Some of that also comes from, you need to make sure that you have the confidence in what you're saying. Don't apologize for knowing your stuff.
Right.
And watch your body language.
Right.
Because men have no problem, going right up, and we're not picking on the men. We love men. Please don't take this the wrong way.
But we're not picking on men. We're encouraging women. That's what
right. Well, we're encouraging women, and we're not saying you have to be a guy, but you do need to have that confidence. You need to sit up straight and have that confidence, and you need to not apologize. You need to not be all slouchy and down in the corner. And, I hope you don't mind if I bring up stuff. No.
Yeah.
Speak. Be heard. Have confidence, and be willing to have a conversation around it. Don't let that completely deflate you in the process. And again, this is the nice thing about this is it's something you can absolutely learn. But it makes a big difference when you're in those situations where you've got valuable information that could move the project forward. You really need to make sure you're being heard.
Okay, so real quick before we go over some bullet points, you mentioned in the show that, and I totally agree, that you build on your own authority. I like how you said that, and that it's layered over time, which is some people freak out, I think, when they feel like they have to know stuff to do their job. They have to have this experience right out of the gate. And it's not true, so it's baby steps. It's like you said, layering. I think that's absolutely accurate, that you'll get better at this persuasiveness as your authority, layers and gets, more whatever. Okay?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as it sort of feeds itself. As you learn more, you have more confidence to say things, which makes people, trust what you're saying because they've learned over time that when you're saying it, it's true, and you've got, you're backing it up with data, and they've seen the positive results, from previous times. So that's where the layering thing happens, is it keeps feeding on itself. The other part of this is you need to be consistent. Don't, on one project, be all kinds of confident and, start building it up and then destroy it on the next.
Actually, that's a good point. All right, so we're getting the audience riled up.
Okay, good. That's what we like.
Bob says, our paralegal students who become newbies in the workforce know technical stuff that attorneys don't know and don't bother to take the time to learn.
Yeah.
And then he says there's more to it. For example, e-discovery methods, ECF filing, building a table of authorities. We tell them to leverage those skills, the paralegal students, to leverage those skills. And I get emails from my students still. I just got an email recently, again, from a student I had 5 years ago. She just got promoted, or she just switched jobs. And she said, I just have to tell you that one of the reasons I got the job was stuff you taught me in Excel.
Yep.
So let's see. Tania's in the house. Yes, so true. People kept encouraging me early on to own your expertise. regardless if it's just being the best at the copy machine or some complex analytics software. Own it, which is part of Women in E-Discovery.
Well, and that's another key thing here. It's not just always about the project. Sometimes it's about, you helping them outside of it. Somebody's constantly having trouble with Excel, and you go over and you teach them, a quick way to do what it is that they're going to do, and the light bulb goes on for them. That also helps to layer on that authority because, hey, you've helped them do their job better. That's going to feed back well on both of you. So it's don't limit it just to meetings but any conversation, any chance you get to pitch in and help a little bit, and not just help to do something for somebody, but to help somebody do something better for themselves helps to build that. So, you might be laughing about the copy machine thing, but that's an incredible example because these things have gotten so complicated. Everybody's frustrated and walks away from when they're broken. But if you can step in and show somebody that, oh no, you cleared paper jam by doing this, this, and this, you're a rock star in their eyes, and they're going to remember that the next time you offer up information.
Okay, I'm checking my notes because it's 1:45. I want to pull out some good ones. No, I did it too. Let's see. You talked about know your audience, anticipate their responses. That's, people probably know that. But you also talked about when to be aggressive and when to be subdued. And that is where it comes into the finesse and nuance that I mentioned earlier. Who to be funny with. I tell people all the time that I use humor, but I have to pick and choose when to use humor because, it doesn't always apply.
Some people are not on board with it, and you need to know that. The same thing with I love to make, as you've probably noticed, references to, popular culture or whatever. But, sometimes you're working with people who just, don't know it. And then you're making them feel bad. So you want to make sure that you pick and choose your moments. And, the whole thing about, when to be assertive is a better word.
Yeah.
And when not to be is just, you don't want to come across as I'm always right. You want to give somebody else a chance to be right too.
It's such a shame. A lot of lit support managers, Harley, get down, Harley. I was petting Harley, and Harley took it that meant she could get up in the seat with me.
A co-star.
Oh, so many people. I am so surprised and disappointed when people try to do what we're saying, and they do it, I guess, in a more animated way, like in your face, or the tone of their voice is off. I mean, it's a shame that some people mess up what they should be doing. Like, they should be persuasive, right? But they do it a little bit. And you had in there also, and you mentioned it earlier too, is you said use the right body language, which I've never said, and watch the body language, which I say a lot.
Oh yeah.
But you're right. It's just. Go ahead. You want to describe what you said? Well, it was pretty cool.
Well, I just, to your point, I do see that a lot as, I'm trying to help people do these kinds of things, that it doesn't always work right out of the box. Please don't let that dissuade you. It's like anything else. You're learning a skill. So yeah, you may come on too strong. You may come on, too quiet about it. But over time, you'll dial it in and you'll find the right zone for you and for the projects you're working on. So don't give up just because it maybe doesn't work the first time out of the box. Nothing does. I mean, it's a learning process. You're never done. You're always going to be adjusting it. So don't let that throw you. But that wasn't really what you were asking.
No, it's fine. You said that you said persuasive is not the same as pushy, which is sort of where we were going with that. But then I want you to explain, you said be confident, which we're talking about, calm, which is not, all, in their face. But then you said well-reasoned. Can you clarify what you meant by that?
Well, that's that, you're not talking, to them and telling them things while doing this. Okay. You need it to be a conversation. So, you know something, you've got information about, the project or the problem or the solution. And sometimes you get so amped up about talking about it that you kind of shut out other people's feedback and reactions, and you just want to make sure that you don't do that. Give people a chance to respond, give people a chance to participate to it, because while your answer and your information may be spot on and rock solid and perfect for the project, that doesn't mean that there isn't a little bit more better information that could be added on top of it.
Yeah, that little nuance right there is having the confidence but not being a know-it-all, right? And having a little bit of an open mind to this is why I love managing people. As a manager, when you have a team, they have to have a voice. Right. And it's the same thing when you're managing up in my case, lawyers. They need their voice. You can't just come in and say, well, you need to do this, this, and this, and this, and this is the way you should always do it, and blah, blah, blah. I need to answer Jennifer's question real quick. Jennifer, the website is womenindiscovery.org. So women in e-discovery, all spelled out, .org. If you probably Google it, it'll come right up. And you can join on the website and then check off which chapter you want to join, and then you should start getting invitations to their monthly meetings. Okay, let me make sure we're almost out of time. Okay, this was a good one. You were talking about knowing your audience and talking in the language they understand, but then you said you might have a mixed audience. Like in my case, I might have attorneys, secretaries, paralegals, right? Or I might have IT, who's technical, and then people that are not technical. So you talked about transitioning smoothly between those three, let's say, and not being, doing it well. So you want to elaborate on that?
Sure. I mean, so, utility infielder before. In this situation, you are the universal translator, which if you're a Star Trek fan, you'll get. But a lot of the job at some point, especially when your project gets to the point where the teams are starting to come together to talk about it as the project is like halfway or close to finished.
Yeah.
You need to be listening for how things are being said and how you're saying things to people. And you might need to, like, if you're talking about a particular problem, in my example with the developers, hey, this page is loading wonky, things are jumping around, I looked at the code, blah, blah, blah. Well, at that point, the rest of the table may be falling asleep. So what I do is I turn to them and I say, so remember when you saw this happening? I'm just explaining to him that, this piece of code might be the thing to look at. Or the flip side, the business is talking about something and we're going back and forth, we're talking about it, and I see the developers falling asleep. It's like, okay, so the reason this is important is this, this, and this. At some point, it really does feel like, you're literally translating between different languages. It's like being in the UN and you're like trying to keep up with everybody.
Well, like in the show, you said you may say the same thing 3 times, but three different ways.
Just to make sure that everybody gets it. And the other thing to watch out for, which is really critical, and this is another thing where you need to have the confidence to speak up. You are in just as much danger when you've got people agreeing about something, and yet from listening to them that they're not saying the same thing, or they're arguing about something when they're actually saying the same thing. So, and
that's so true.
Try really hard not to laugh out loud, but every time this happens, I'm like, okay, don't eye roll, don't laugh, just deal with it, because it happens so often. And it gets really animated and people are yelling sometimes. And I'm like, hang on. They're saying this, You're all saying the same thing. It's okay. This is exactly what this all means. And sometimes you have to explain it to each group, but then you're sure everybody's in agreement.
Yeah, that was perfect. Because both those scenarios happen all the time, and you end up being like a moderator.
Yes. It's not in the job description, but it is a part of the job.
The same scenarios, this is why we're having the show together, because you're talking about your environment, and I'm imagining as you're talking a conference room where I've got a partner, 2 associates, a paralegal, and lit support. And we're all trying, it's a project. Every litigation case is a project. Every thing we're doing that particular month is what I would call a sub-project, So we're all coming back at it from different perspectives. And your point about how they could be thinking they're agreeing and thinking they're saying the same thing. And you and I, in our roles, pipe up and say, okay, so I just want to clarify, so-and-so saying this and so-and-so saying that. I'm just going to translate what they're saying, and let's make sure we're all on the same page. So it's excellent. It happens all the time,
especially since, the same terminology may be used by the different groups, but to mean completely different things. So that you really need to keep an ear out for that. And just as an aside, one of the things in either situation I find handy sometimes is to actually, draw it or put it, on the spreadsheet or whatever it is that you've got in front of you, because then at least everybody's looking at the same thing. Because the other problem you run into is if you've got 10 people in the room and you say the color blue, you're dealing with, 12 to 24 different colors in people's heads.
Yeah.
So, but by putting this in front of them and saying it's this, okay, then at least everybody's looking at the same thing and discussing the same thing, because too much time gets wasted because people think they have the right picture in their head and they don't. And you want to catch that as early as possible.
Yeah, that was one of our points we were going to say is you said in the episode, that you want to paint a picture or you want to use storytelling. So that's goes to what you just said. But I want to, one last point, you guys. Kathleen talked about know when to step back and tread lightly. So this is something that goes to body language also, but a combination of body language and what they're saying, obviously. But can you talk a little bit about how do you identify that and, you know?
Yeah, well, sometimes you just, if you worked with a group of people long enough, you know what their triggers are.
That's true.
So, in that situation, when you're going down some track that, that this particular person, and I'm sorry, it's usually higher up management, is going to go off the rails over.
In our case, it's partners, know-it-alls.
Exactly, yeah. So you want to just make sure that, knowing that that's coming, try to anticipate all the things that that they've said before, so that before you actually go and make the point, you've kind of set it up so that it can't fail. But at least you've addressed a lot of those issues before they go spinning off out of control. The other side of it is, sometimes it's just not the right time to bring something up. Sometimes you've got something really important that you brought to the meeting and you really need the answer on, but the meeting has already been super contentious and it's been going on for 2 hours and people are just done. So that's not the best time. Even though you may need it right then, you may just have to find a different way to get that answer. Because if you bring it up at a time when everybody's heads are already exploding, you are destined to fail. So you don't want to do that to yourself. You want to be able to read the room and know the right time to say the thing.
That's an excellent point to end on, because that is something people don't recognize. I've seen it time and time again when I'm in the audience, like I'm not leading the meeting, and I'm like, they don't even notice. Like they don't even see what's going on in front of them. So that's definitely a learning moment. I hope a lot of you are nodding your heads and thinking of people or at least thinking of how you can improve some of your skills. We're going to sign off in a few seconds here, so if you have anything you want to say with the comment delay, now's the time. But I want to thank you, Kathleen, for saying yes when I asked you.
Thank you. This has been fun.
And also, why don't you go ahead and tell everybody, you have 2 shows now. You want to talk about both or just one of them?
Well, we'll stick to the BA thing. That's the more pertinent one. So so it's thebazone.com. Myself, my co-host Marianne Morrison do it every Thursday at 8:00 Eastern time. We do it on Periscope, on Facebook, and on YouTube. I have to keep track.
And you guys, Marianne, oh my God, Marianne is hilarious. She has one of those like dry sense of humor, but in a good way. She's freaking hilarious. She cracks me up.
She is.
And you guys play well off each other too. Wow.
Yeah, we've worked together on several different jobs. We've known each other a long time. So, sometimes it's stand-up act, sometimes it's content. So we try to do both, but we know too much about each other.
All right. So
I know that you guys are not really BAs except for Patty, but if you know any BAs, feel free to send them our way. We're fun and we're friendly.
I forgot to show this photo, so you guys, this is what Kathleen and Marianne open up their show with sometimes. This is a picture of the one on the left is Kathleen's dog, and the one on the right is Marianne's dog. So that's another reason that Kathleen and I bonded right away is, we're both dog lovers. So all right, so thank you so much for your time, Kathleen. Thank you, everybody else.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend. Sydney is saying thank you. So, anyways, have a good weekend, and I'll see you next week. I have another guest coming on, so I'm really excited about it. So
I can't wait. I love your show.
All right, take care, everybody.
I'm a guest and a fan. Bye.
See ya. Bye.